to Cooper Talk.
Welcome to Cooper Talk. I'm your host, Steve Cooper, and remember, I'm only as hip as my guests. I got to tell you something, people. Joanne and I were in Cleveland 2 weeks ago. We went to the Football Hall of Fame. We went to the Art Museum, which I'm not a big Art Museum fan, but that one wasn't bad. And we went to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, where I saw my guest's name. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about his new solo album. And my guest, from Guns N' Roses, but his new album, Rock and Roll Chose Me, just was released just the other day on streaming. It came out on an album, I think, in August. And my guest is Dizzy Reed. How you doing, Dizzy?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so first of all, I want to get the where did the effing Reed come from? Because I know it was Dizzy Reed, now it's Dizzy effing Reed. Was it because people all just, hey, it's Dizzy fucking Reed, or where did that come from? Because I think it's a great add to your name.
Well, I gotta give credit where credit's due, and my good friend Axel started introducing me as Dizzy fucking Reed, and it's just sort of stuck, For all intents and purposes of marketing and whatnot, we've shortened it to effing.
Right. Because it doesn't look good when you try to get a record out and it says fucking on it, because people go, hey, that's not good.
Right. Well, by the way, he did ask my mom if that was okay, that he called me Dizzy fucking Reed, and she said, oh, yeah, I love it.
Now, I want to talk about the album. I listened to it. One thing I really like is intro through the outro. I love that you have just a musical piece on there. What made you decide to do that? Because, we don't, and it's because you play the keyboards. And I thought of you because you play the keyboards. I always think back to Frampton Comes Alive when he goes, Bob Mayo on the keyboards. And I always think about that, about the keyboardist doesn't always get the recognition. But what made you choose to put a musical piece on your album? Because it's your second solo album, but some people are probably like, wait a second, we want to hear singing.
I think, first of all, it was part of the following song, which is Earn It to Burn It. It was all one big thing. And everyone sort of convinced me to split them up into two songs. It was too long, I guess. Whatever, but so once I did that, then it became so much more. I sat down with Jeff Duncan, who plays guitar on it, and we just kind of hammered it out into what it is now. And within that sort of process, I was able to sort of have a quick little tribute to three of my favorite keyboard players, John Lord, Booker T, and Edgar Winter. And so that's the idea behind it, really.
Okay, so you came out with a solo album. I always wonder, you're an artist, you played with Guns N' Roses, you played with a bunch of people, Dead Daisies, Hookers and Blow, a bunch of different people. You've had your whole life you've been a musician. This is your second solo album. When does the idea for this album start churning? Is it 5 years ago, or like right after you did the first solo album? You said, "Oh, I'm gonna do it," but then you got busy touring. How does an artist come up with just putting out a solo album?
Well, right after my first record, I really started thinking about the second one. I really did, and over time compiled the 10 best songs that I thought, and 10 best ideas that I had, and thought these would be the best ones to tidy up, finish up, and put them on a record.
So you sit there, you start working it. Now, how do you start assembling the band? What is the process of getting your people you want to play on the album with? Because a lot of people in the industry, but you probably have people that you really trust and want to have on. How did you set the whole thing up? Because it must be a hard process to get people you really dig and trust to play for you.
A lot of it is familiarity. Of location, locality, people's busy schedules. But I knew right off the bat that I wanted Kevin Kapler and Greg Coates to play drums and bass on a lot of songs. And I also knew I wanted Johnny Kelly and Mike Duda, who I play with in Hookers and Blow, to play on some songs as well. I also threw my friend Harry Ostrom in there too on bass. And then I knew I wanted Jeff Duncan, and I knew I wanted Forrest Goss, Mark Zabon, Alex from Hookers and Blow, Brian Sabalos, and so luckily they were available, and they made time when they were in town to come and play on these songs and help me work on the songs too, help them just get them up to speed where they needed to be. So this was on my first record that I co-produced with Del James. he was that was kind of his job. He kind of sort of orchestrated who was going to play on what songs and everything. But this time around, I just went with some guys that I was more totally familiar with and trusted and knew and heard in my head that they would be right for the songs.
Now, what was your writing process? Because I always hear from different, I do comedy, and my writing process, something pops in my head, and I write it down. I know people who sit down and write everything down. When it came to this album and your overall songwriting, because I know you wrote some stuff with GNR, what has your songwriting process been, and when did you start really writing songs?
I like to go up to an excluded spot in the forest, which I'm not going to give away the location, and the songs come to me. They're channeled to me through nature, through different various. No, I always got stuff in my head, and if I don't get it out of my head, it'll drive me crazy. And that's one reason, one part of the process. I think as an artist, as a musician, like we all want to start writing at some point. It's that creative expression. It's very important for a lot of musicians to have that. It's just part of our makeup, who we are. And I think that's what drives me to write songs, and then lyrically we can challenge and take on different subjects and different things, and heartache and heartbreak and whatever else.
Well, it's funny, when you look on the album, some of the songs have explicit, which always cracks me up because we're around the same age. That was never something that thought, it's like I still remember hearing a live bootleg from Aerosmith when Steven Tyler says "Motherfucking Dream On" in that song, and we were all like, "Oh my God, this is amazing!" And it's funny now that it has to come to explicit. Now, does that ever go into your mind when you're writing it? Does you ever think about, well, oh my God, this might be explicit? Do I want that E labeled, or does you just say screw it?
I don't think about that at all. Maybe I should, but I don't. I think it's part of who I am. It's part of how I want to express myself. And I think there can be too much. I think it borders on, sometimes it can come off as ignorant, but I think there's a right time to throw in those words that need to be there. I think it's part of telling the story. With the labels, as far as explicit language and stuff, I think we both know that in the past, when they first started making that a part of the production and selling process, it sold more records. It's like it's very difficult for me to go see. I'm probably not going to go see a PG movie. I'm probably going to go see something that's a little bit, more hardcore. It's the same thing. But again, I don't want to come off as I don't. I mean, if kids listen to the record and they start cursing, it's not. I don't think it's because of that. I think it's because of the environment they're in. And personally, I don't, my kids drop F-bombs all the time, but they're adults. But when they were younger, they did. And it's part of how I talked around the house and stuff. So I think socially, when you're out in public, don't do it. But when you're making records and listening to rock and roll, it's all part of it, man.
I know. I agree with you. I think, it's funny because, and it also comes back to parenting, I think, because, when I was a kid, I remember getting a George Carlin album. It was called Toledo Window Box. Now, my parents had no idea. I had no idea what that was a pot leaf on it. I was like fifth grade. My parents were so straight-laced. They had no idea what it was. But it didn't change me. I bought it. I listened to it because I liked how he said jumbo shrimp and stuff like that. It didn't influence me to all of a sudden sit there being in fifth grade and go, oh my God, I have to go out and smoke pot. Because once again, I had no idea what he was talking about.
Right. I think maybe, and then later on when you do start smoking pot, right, and then the stuff makes sense to you, I mean, Cheech and Chong's, they're funny, and then they're really funny. Yeah.
So how would you, on this album, what would you describe the genre as? Because you got a lot of different sounds going on. I really think the last song, My Wounds Don't Bleed, and that's there's just some really different songs. I mean, one of them, I hate to say it, you might get into that sounds a little bit Queenish, like the old school Queen. Like some of this stuff sounds like like 80s, 90s rock. I mean, I don't know if you know, I don't know if you thought that at all, but like I listen to it and I go, all right, it's really catchy. Like one of the keyboards sort of sound like, and you'll probably get pissed, but sort of sound like Renegade from Styx, like something that had a strong drive. And I couldn't really classify what this album was. Can you classify it as a genre, or do you think you just went for a lot of different sounds?
Well, first of all, I really don't like the idea of genres. I think it's like a trap almost. And I think when people are looking for music on, when iTunes first came out, and I remember seeing some of the genres for the GNR songs, and it was just like, November Rain, metal. It's like, really? I don't, that's, it's weird. I don't know who makes those decisions, but with the concept of, within the concept of genres, I like so much different music, and it's all, I'm like a sponge. So it just comes out. I never set out to go, oh, I'm going to write a song that sounds like Queen because, well, first of all, that would be impossible. And, if anything, I'm thinking along the lines of, a lot of my favorite bands, including Guns N' Roses. It's all guitar-based music, and that's pretty much where a lot of my ideas come from. There's a few that are piano-based. There's a lot of songs I wrote on guitar and I adapted to piano later. But it's just a combination of everything. And I don't know. They're going to have to make another genre for this record, I guess, if they really want to do it right. I just call it rock and roll. That's what I call it.
I like that answer because I just said that because sometimes people do say things in genre. And it has different sounds. And I think you're right. I think when we look back, rock and roll albums had that. Like, if you listen to Led Zeppelin, all of a sudden they throw Tangerine on. It's like, well, wait a second. Is that easy listening? I mean, so I know what you're saying, that it has different sounds. And I think that you're right. That was a bad question for me to ask you the genre. But I always some people will say, here's our genre.
No, I'm glad you asked me that because I think it's important for people to they should probably look past that. It's not fair to classify music other than maybe from a time period. It's all art to me. We're artists and we're expressing ourselves and shouldn't be restricted to a label that some entity puts on us or puts on our music.
So, when did you start playing keyboards? Was that your first instrument? When did you get involved in music? Because you've been a lifelong musician, which is great. Because a lot of people don't have that luxury to say I've been playing all my life. I know people have been in bands and they had to leave and do something. But when did you start? Was piano or keyboards your first choice, or when did you get involved in music?
I started. My grandparents lived with us for a long time when I was growing up. And my grandma had an organ upstairs, and I was watching her play one day and asked if I could check it out. And she saw a talent when I started playing. I could play by ear, and she sort of nurtured that the best she could. And eventually, I remember listening to Booker T and the MGs. I was starting to get into pop music. My dad had a lot of great records, and that was one of them. One of the artists he liked was Booker T and the MGs, and first time I heard that, I realized that's the instrument. I joined a band when I was 10 in sixth grade, and me and that drummer and one of the guitar players, we stayed together for the next 8 years. So by 11, we were playing gigs. By the time we were in high school, we were playing bars, and within that process, I sort of became the lead singer by default. And so that's always been something that has been there that in the back of my mind, but I kind of burnt myself out doing that, singing at a very young age and not really knowing how to. I could sing, but I just got tired of it and I wanted to, so I thought maybe if I pursue a gig position as a keyboard player, I'll have more opportunities because there were so many bass players, singers, drummers, guitar players. And it turned out to be a good decision. It got me to LA and eventually got me in Guns N' Roses.
Now, what music were you playing at 11? I think when I was 11, I think one of my first albums was like the Partridge Family and a Tom Jones album. I mean, it was just something. But at 11, because you said you had Booker T, who else? I mean, what other songs were you playing? I mean, who were at that age? 11-year-olds aren't really into rock, but so what were you guys playing?
Oh, we were definitely into rock, man. So we were playing Stones. I gotta say, one of the first album, actually the very first album I bought was like my brother and I have been buying 45 singles. And I was really getting into the Stones, but that production, like on Sympathy for the Devil, for instance, is just over the top. It's so great. I bought Get Your Yayas Out thinking it was a greatest hits record, and I put it on, and it was this raw live record, and that just changed my whole view of everything. I'm like, dudes, we can play these songs now. Check this out. If we do it kind of like this. So there was that, and we were really into Kiss, of course, because we were kids still, and then we discovered Girls, and we didn't listen to Kiss anymore. And then, and then Leonard Skinner was really big in Colorado when I was a kid, so we were doing those songs. At one point, I think we had 3 guitar players, even though we didn't know how to orchestrate that. We just did it anyway. And Bachman Turner Overdrive and God, so many other great songs. And then, to get gigs, we had to play top 40 stuff too. So I remember play that funky music, White Boy, and had to play Color My World so we could play at the proms. So we but yeah, we had a pretty, and we throw in like Johnny Be Good and stuff like that. And so we were definitely heavy into rock, but by 7th grade, easily.
So when you how old are you? And was the whole band going out, or did you guys break up, or was it one of those things? We're good. And what was your band's name? Like that last band you were in?
So there was a few, but the first band we started off as the Hairy Bananas, and then we were Mud Shark, and eventually we became Bootleg, and that was the name of our band after Live Aerosmith, Live Bootleg, and that was the name of our band from all through high school and beyond. But when we were 20, I think we'd had enough of each other. We were all we moved into a house together after high school, and we were touring around. We were going out and doing whole weeks at different bars around Colorado, and we all worked during the day too. So it was very aggressive and very busy lifestyle. But I think we warned each other. We grew our separate ways. We're still friends to this day. So I went on, and the first band I joined as just a keyboard player was a band called the Eccentrics, which was this sort of post-punk new wave band because it was like the early 80s. And then one day I went and saw a band called Gauntlet that I had been hearing about because I was going out to the clubs in Denver and everyone's like, Gauntlet, All the girls are talking about Gauntlet. And I saw them play and I'm like, oh my God, I got to be on that band. And, as fate would have it, this guy got a job at my father's grocery store where I was working. And we called him the Snake. And the Snake, he said he used to be in that band. Anyway, he introduced me to the drummer, who was still a very good friend of mine. And after I saw them play, all the girls were screaming, all the guys were sitting down. I said, yes, this is the band I want to be in. Turns out they were looking for a keyboard player. And so I left the other band, joined that band. And when I did, the singer said, yeah, can you move to LA April 1st, which was in like a couple of weeks. I'm like, yes. And so we came out to LA and the rest is history, I guess.
Explain to me what the LA scene was, because like that, but then because I moved back from LA 7 years ago. I was out there for 18 years, and I was still remember like I was performing. We do go to the Coconut Teaser, but this was like back 20 years ago, whatever. But when you got out there, what was it like? Was the Sunset Strip already jumping, or was it starting to jump? What was it like when you and the Gauntlet went out there?
The Sunset Strip was in full bloom. It was crazy, and it was intimidating, really, to me, because I joined this band that was the top of the heap, in Denver, and then we moved to LA, and we were 10,000 deep, and and so you work your way back up, and it's just really dedication and hard work was all we could really do. And that meant sleeping on the floor of the studio. That meant practicing all the time. That meant going out every night to get people to know your band, and then and rehearsing and rehearsing and rehearsing and rehearsing, and then you do that first gig, and you bring in enough people, and you impress enough people, and then you're off and running. So. But it was a lot of hard work, and in that band and in the next band that I would join too, which would be Guns N' Roses. um, I learned early on that even though I started playing music because I didn't really want to work, it's always hard work. You have to work hard, and that's so. I think, yeah, the Sunset Strip at that time, it was crazy, man. It was totally nuts, and I have a lot of fond memories, but I think it's euphoric recall because it wasn't always easy. When we're talking, there was 10,000 bands from all over the world, and they all had the same thing in mind. They wanted to be the next big thing, and most of them didn't have a clue. But if you just and a lot of them were real competitive, and they were, they could be real like dicks, but I found that if you're being cool to the other bands and trying to strike up a brotherhood, it goes a lot further.
Now, when you were with Gauntlet and you went to LA, were you playing originals or were you writing them? And did you guys come close to a record tracker or a record contract? What was the run of Gauntlet? The run of the Gauntlet, but.
For those who are listening who might have been around back then, we changed the name of the band. It was, when we got out here, it was Johnny and the Jaguars, and then we became the Wild, and that was the same band. I didn't, I had a very minimal part of the writing process with that band, but the songs were great, and it's a great band, it really was. But it just it never took off. It never. We were huge in LA, but as far as the record labels weren't. They weren't. I don't know. I guess they just didn't think it would go as far as they would like, or I think they were trying to wrest away too much creative control. I can't really say. I don't know.
Now, when that happens, when the songs are great and you're popular in LA, but as you guys said, something's just not happening. Mentally, what do you go through? Do you sit there and say, you know what, we may break up, but you put all this time, as you said, all this hard work, all this sweat into it. How do you keep sane mentally when something that you're looking, because it's an up and down road. Being a musician is an up and down ride. How did you keep your shit together when your band broke up?
Well, I was never gonna. The Wild was still going strong when I joined Guns N' Roses. I had to part ways. But I think it's just dedication, man. I'm like, I'm not going home until I get this figured out, and until I put myself in a position where at the very least, I put myself in a position to play rock and roll music for a living, and I was able to do that, luckily.
Now, how did you end up in Guns N' Roses? It's funny, Gilby Clark was on my show ages ago when I was in LA, and he had said he heard he was in it through, like, MTV News. And he told the story, but he's like, so they go, oh, Guns N' Roses found a new guitarist. It's Gilby Clark. And he's like, holy shit, I'm their guitarist. How did you, what was your path to joining that band? Because they were huge when you joined. What was the path? And as you sitting there, you left the Wild. What was what happened?
Well, when we moved out from Denver to LA, we moved into a tiny little rehearsal studio off of Sunset, and we were sleeping on the floor in there. And next door was this big studio, and there was like 3 bands in there, and they all shared it, and they all had day jobs, and they we called them like Madame Wong's bands, and because Madame Wong's had become something that way past the punk rock thing. It was like this new wave. I don't know how to describe it, but so they all lived in this big place. Anyway, we found another place which fell through as fate would have it. All 3 of those bands moved out of the big studio. We moved into the big studio. Guns N' Roses moved in next door into the place that we were at. So now we were next door neighbors. and they were huge already. They hadn't gotten a deal yet, but they were massive. And so I became friends with those guys, with Axel especially. And I think at really early on, he heard me playing one day, and he said, you know, you're going to be the keyboard player in the future. Like he had this whole plan in his head, and it involved adding me as a piano player later on. And you hear that stuff all the time in LA. Everyone's got hopes and dreams, and it never comes to fruition. But you know, we watched Guns N' Roses just take off and become massive. And every time he'd come back into town, I'd run into him at a club or something, and he'd say, "Yeah, we're still going to need you." And you know, he followed through with it. And when they called, I said, "I'll be there."
What is that like to get a call? I mean, that's like when I talk to actors who all of a sudden get a TV series. You know, it's all the hard work has finally paid off. And I always say, you knew him because of your work and dedication. He knew of you, and you met him. And I think people always say, "Oh, they're overnight success." No, you have to have the chops, and you have to have the talent. And when you have that opportunity, you have to take it. I've always felt that way because there's so many stories like that of, can you say kismet or whatever that word is? But for you, what is it like when you get that call? Do you sit there and go, "Wow, I'm joining one of the biggest bands in the world"? I mean, how do you keep grounded? Because it must be such a high.
Well, they definitely kept me grounded when I went down for the first time to the studio to record. You know, they were, um, uh, it was kind of like, yeah, they were keeping me grounded. I'll leave it at that. But I was not, you know, I was determined to do the best that I could and give that band everything I had, and I feel like I've done that over the years.
Now, when did you get the chance to start writing with them? Because you said you didn't write a lot with the other band, but you had, you had writing and you wanted to write, I'm guessing. How did you start writing with them, and did that help you develop as a writer that you are now?
Just being around those guys and understanding the process, the writing process that they and honestly, it's just the amount of hard work that they put into the songs. It's that rubbed off on me in a big way. And same with the band I was in before that. You know, it's just a lot of people think it's easy to write songs. It's not. You know, you can have a hook, you can have a catchy little bit, but it's a craft. It really, you have to really. It's to be fair to the song, you have to put it through the ringer, and you have to let the guys that know what they're doing on their instrument do their thing to the song. And so just, I learned that early on. But I never really, when I came in, everything was pretty much written for the Use Your Illusion records. But after that, I would just get, because there was no, we didn't have Pro Tools and computers and stuff like that. That's not something you just had like everybody does now. So I would get studio time somewhere, and I would go in and make demos, and then play them for the guys and see what happens. So yeah.
It amazes me about songwriting because you mentioned the Stones earlier. Like when you hear "Gimme Shelter," you go, "Where's it coming?" Like there's certain things you hear, and it's like for you guys when you would work together and write together. Does stuff come from when you're just jamming? Like let's say you have an idea and you go, "Let's do this." How does a song come to fruition?
Well, for me personally, with this record, my first record, I'm at a point now where I will. But to answer your question real quick, yes, a lot of songs come from a sub jam. A lot of people bring in an idea. It just depends. There's different ways. I don't think there's any real sort of formula. It's just it becomes a band thing. Once you put it in the room, it's now part of the band. But for me now, it's like I like to get things all the way to a certain point before I start bringing in other people. I want it to be. I take it as far as I can, but I don't play guitar. I write on guitar. So if, I want a real guitar player to come in and then just say, just do what you want to do with it. And same with the drums and bass. And we'll work it out in the studio or in a rehearsal space at first before we go in the studio and get it right, get it tight, and just build on that.
Explain that to me. because I'm not a musician. You don't play the guitar, but you write on the guitar. So that means you know how to play the guitar. But tell me, how does it go? I mean, first of all, you learned guitar after the keyboard, right?
I I picked up a guitar early on because I realized all the songs that I liked were guitar based. Most of the bands that I like were guitar based. So yeah, the Stones and Skinner and the Kinks and the Who and all those great classic bands. So even Deep Purple with the great John Lord, I mean, those are still a lot of those they come off guitar based. So I picked up the guitar just to be able to communicate with guitar players. Say, what if you did this, or check this chord out, or this thing. So my skills are very limited, and so and if you have an idea in your head, and I figured this out very quickly when I was, and you try to show it to someone, a guitar player, and you try to play it on a keyboard, it's not going to come off. If you pick up a guitar, then they'll understand it, and that's more what I'm hearing in my head most of the time. I do have ideas on the piano sometimes too, but a lot of it's written on guitar. So, but I figure I know so many great guitar players. It'd be silly for me to. There's no reason for me to pick up a guitar in front of people and perform when I can do my thing.
Now you mentioned earlier 3 of your idols, and I know why the first one Booker was. Who were the other 2, and why did they stand out to you? You said John Lord, and there was one other. Why do they stand out to you? Why did they put an impact on you?
Well, John Lord was. I mean, he was. Well, Booker T. He was such a soulful, great organ player, and again, that was, like I said, that was my first instrument, and a great band, the MGs. John Lord was sort of like the extreme of the Hammond. He was the coolest. He was the heaviest. He was out there. He was riffing with the big boys, right? So he could compete with the guitars, and so of course that's going to be appealing to me, definitely. Edgar Winter was, I think, the other guy I mentioned. I remember the first time I saw a video on, it was like Midnight Special or Don Kirshner's rock concert, which back then that was the only way you actually saw bands, unless you went to see them in concert. There were no videos even yet, but I saw it was a thing of him doing Frankenstein. I'm like, oh, this guy's the flipping coolest, and he played everything. But when he has that big keyboard strapped on and he's playing that riffs, I was like, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And I always wanted to do that. I remember, getting old synths and putting a nail inside to put a strap on, and it just ended up ruining it, or it's just too flipping heavy. So he was the coolest, and it wasn't a keytar. Keytars to me are just kind of like, I don't know, like this. I don't want to. Everyone's, where'd you get a keytar? No.
So I want to ask you something about when you were at Guns N' Roses. How did you acclimate to playing such big shows? Because you're playing the LA scene, and it's something. Then all of a sudden, I don't know what the biggest. What do you think the biggest crowd you play with them is? 100,000.
With GNR?
Yeah.
Yeah, 100,000 or more. Yeah.
So in the beginning, how did you acclimate from playing the clubs, and all of a sudden you're with arenas? I mean, I know you're a musician, and all these people will say, "Oh, it's you don't see the crowd at all," and stuff like that. But for me, I played City Winery a while ago, and it was sort of big, and it was different than a club because it's a big stage and it's different. You have to learn how to play the room more. Like a little shitty club, you can just play it. But for you, how did you, all of a sudden you're playing these big venues, and I'm sure when you first showed up, people were like, people are used to someone new.
Right. Well, the first gig I did with GNR was Rock in Rio, which was like 100,000 people. So that was like they pushed me off the board into the deep end, basically. So. But for me, it's I'm sitting down playing the piano, and I used to have a lot more energy on stage. But I'm in the same spot. So it's that part's not that difficult, but I do it's always I've always had a great appreciation for the guys who can sell it and who can work a crowd that size and who can deliver every night, doing that every night. And I've been fortunate enough to play with so many great musicians that can do that. So, but you know, the other side of that is I really do like coming back to the bars. I like coming back to the clubs and playing with my band, Hookers and Blow, or with my thing. It's just, there's a connection there that's a little bit more, it's a little more, I don't know, close, for lack of a better word. Uh, so it's just, you can read a room and feel it. And I've been doing that my whole life. So, um, I have a lot of fun doing that.
Now, in 2018, you recorded your first solo album. What made you decide to do that one? Was that something that you had it in your mind? You're like, I want to do this. I mean, I know you have the new one out, but what made you Rock and Roll Ain't Easy? What made you decide to record that?
I had some demos that I had done over the years, and I started playing them for my good friend Del James and another instrumental or key person, and that was my good friend Mike Duda, who plays bass on a lot of those songs on that first record and a couple on this record. He plays with with great Wasp and also Hookers and Blow, and so I had these demos, and they were like, "Dude, you need to put this stuff out. You need to record it for real." And Del ended up. I was out on tour. And I said, yeah, I'd love to do it. I don't have the finances right now to do it, and I want to do it right. If some opportunity comes up, then we'll do it. We'll go in and do it. And I was on tour with the Psychedelic Furs. I was in Spain, and Del called me and he says, "Hey, check this out. I got a studio for us." He found a great deal on a studio. The guy would do it for spec, and so we went in. When I got back in over a period of a couple years when I was home, we would go in and just knock out bass and drums and guitar and eventually the whole record.
Now, how did you end up getting involved with the Psychedelic Furs? Because they're quite across a different sound than Guns N' Roses. I just saw them last summer, and they were great. But how did you get involved with them? And then did you have to learn, okay, with both them and Guns N' Roses, how many songs do you have to learn when you're coming with a new band? And before that, how did you get involved with the Psychedelic Furs?
Richard Fortas had been, and Frank Ferrer also had been playing with them off and on, and also with Love Spit Love, which was Richard Butler's other band. So, they were they needed a keyboard player for a tour or two, and Richard suggested me, and which was great because I was looking for work, and I love their music. I've always loved it, so it was very exciting and very cool. But yes, I did have to learn a lot, and it's also besides that, with a band like the Furs, it's the programming sounds to come up with sounds that were like that on the record, on their records, and it's very diverse. Sonically, what they have going on, especially the records they did with the great Todd Rundgren. So it's like a double challenge: learn the songs, come up with the parts, and then get into the style too. But once it got rolling, it was so much fun, and I learned a lot also from touring with those guys, and love them to death. I try to go see them if we're in the same town and go say hi because they're great. And they had a sax player, Mars Williams, the late great Mars Williams, who's one of the most dynamic performers I've ever seen. He just could play the shit out of that saxophone. He actually appears on Rock and Roll Ain't Easy. He plays the sax on that song as well as a couple other songs in that record. So I was fortunate enough to get him in the studio with me too. So, Psychedelic Furs, awesome stuff.
Now with GNR, how many songs did you have to learn? Did you have to learn the whole catalog, or did you already know some of it, or how was that transition? Because once again, people are, sometimes bands throw something up and then they go, oh, like Blue Oyster Cult does that. They'll go, hey, give us something you never heard of. And if you're a new guy in Blue Oyster Cult, you're going, holy shit, I don't know that. It must be tough.
Right now, our repertoire library is massive. There's quite a shitload of songs. Luckily, I knew most of those songs from before when we did them in the studio. And so, but it's an ever growing thing, It's there's only additions, never subtractions.
Now, I don't always trust Wikipedia, but I was on your Wikipedia page, and it said you played with Johnny Cash.
I did not play with Johnny Cash.
Well, you got to check it out. It says you played on one of his albums. So I was saying that.
No, I think it was Johnny Crash.
Oh, Johnny Cash. Okay, that makes more sense. I was going, wait a second. How's he know Johnny Cash? Well, okay. Well, okay then.
I did play. I did play in a Johnny Crash record.
Now, you also,
Johnny Cash.
I was like, I looked at it real quick. You also would play with the Dead Daisies, right?
Yes.
So how did that come about? Because they're touring. That's like I hate to use the term supergroup, but it is. It's always very great musicians in that band. How did that come about?
I'd been wanting to do stuff with John Stevens, who was the singer, for a while. I met him when he was singing for NXS, and we really hit it off. And also Marco Mendoza was playing bass, and Richard Forrest started doing the gig, and he said, hey, I'm doing this gig, and he told me who was in it, and they needed a keyboard player. I said, I'm in. So when we had time, when the stars aligned, we got to tour, and we did an EP, and then we did a full record, and I got, it was kind of a rotating, revolving door of musicians, but I got to play with some great guys in that band, like so many great musicians that I got to tour with and record with, and that was a good experience.
Now back to your latest album. Did Rock and Roll chose you? The title, where does it come from? Do you feel it chose you?
I think it's, I didn't choose rock and roll chose me. And it goes back to that first gig. I was a very shy kid. I had a speech impediment. I had a bad accident and it knocked out all my teeth, and I was always having a hard time because everything was changing. They were trying to fix my mouth. But when I got on stage, and so, I kept to myself. I was very quiet. But the first time I got on stage and I had the mic and I was singing, and all the girls were screaming, and all of a sudden I felt like I found my spot. I found my place in life, and I knew right then and there that's what I was going to do. I stuck with it. And at the time, we're talking 1974, 75, it was even more insane to try to say you're going to pursue that. It was just like, okay, it's a phase. He'll grow out of it or whatever. But we went for it. We were working hard, and a part of that is because it gave me a voice, and I think the lyrics to the title track kind of explain it all. And that song really, it's about for all the people who found themselves and all the people who work hard and at the end of the day, that satisfaction of knowing that it was worth it. And also the fact that rock and roll, it chose me, but it really brings all of us together. It's one of those things that in a time when we're so effing divided about everything, music is something that can bring us together. And I see it all the time, all over the world, different countries, different people, different religions. They come out in droves to see rock and roll music play. They come out, they come out to see Guns N' Roses, and I hope that rock and roll lives on in the fact that it does keep music. It brings people together, and that's so that's the whole thing about rock and roll chose me. It's really about all of us in a lot of ways. Now,
do you have any favorite tracks on the album? Because I really like DIB too. And I like the whole album, but do you have do any tracks stick out to you? Like, I mean, I'm sure you love them all and you've been playing, but are there any ones that you go, man, I mean, is there any like? Do you have any favorites on the album?
I can't, really, I think I'm so proud and happy of every track. And I made sure that, again, that I wasn't going to put it out until I was totally happy with it. So I think they're all great. Not to be a cop out of your question, but it's really all of them, I mean, I love listening to it all, and I think it plays well front to back.
Now, do you have any favorites when you're on tour with GNR to play? Is there any certain songs you really love to play personally, and you're looking forward to it and hoping it's on the set list?
I think some of the cool piano songs, that I did way back when, or some of the newer stuff, like, like that Obsession, and what else? I don't know. Just used to love her, that kind of stuff. It's, the more organic rock and roll stuff. But I love all those songs too. There's not one I can say that I don't like playing. I love all of them.
Now, are you going to plan to record another album when this is done, or are you going to sit there and wait a little? Do we have to wait, 7 years, or what's going through your head right now? Do you have shit going through right that you go, I'm going to put another one out in a few years? Because it must be exciting when you get that, and you said you're so proud of it, and I can tell you're proud of it, and you play it, and you sit there and you want to bask in you want to bask in it, but then you're going, yeah, but but I want to keep it going. I mean, I would think. I mean, what is your plan? Because I'm sure GNR will tour again or whatever. But for you, what is your plan? Are you going to write this, or are you going to put a band together and take it on the road, or what's going to happen?
Well, I've already started recording other songs, so I don't know. I hope it doesn't take 7 years to put it out. I hope we can put it out when it's done. So. Yeah, it's definitely in the works, but maybe, I don't know, maybe we'll just put out singles. Maybe I like putting out records. I think it's everyone says it's an old, worn out concept, but for me, it's just kind of how I think, and I think that certain collections of songs belong together, and they belong together on a side A and a side B. So it'll probably.
You've been a musician your whole life, okay, and you've been working. Do you ever think, like, if you hadn't found the keyboard, if you hadn't gotten that first band, if you hadn't moved to LA, do you ever think, what would you be doing? Would you be like a school teacher? Would you be be a restaurant manager? What would you be?
I think I'd be a really good crack smoking bank robber.
All right, that's good.
No, I don't know. I always wanted to be an archaeologist. It seems kind of crazy, but and I did have a degree to go to University of Colorado for journalism, but I turned that down actually because I wanted to play music, and so I did some writing for the school newspaper, and I had a column called Fear and Loathing, and everyone loved to read it on Fridays because I just would take on subjects that I knew the students wanted to hear about, like after parties and keggers and stuff like that. But the administration, when they realized how popular it was, they came down on me pretty hard, and started telling me what I could and couldn't write. I'm like, but you just taught me that we should be able to write. It's freedom of the press, and now you're telling me what I can and can't write. And I realized right then and there that the whole thing was kind of a scam. So I said, no, I'm going to do this. I want to play music where I can say whatever the fuck I want. So.
Well, you've been playing music, and so you would have been you don't think you ever would have been a journalist, but you do write because you write songs, so that's sort of journalism in a certain way. It's a freedom of expression, and you can come across what you wanted to get down on pen and paper.
It definitely helped me, and at that time I was kind of following in my brother's footsteps, and he really was a big influence on me as far as like the lyrical writing process, and he turned me on to a lot of great music too. So, yeah.
I have one final question. I always ask my guests this. Looking back, and you've had a great career. You're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I know. I saw you. We went. I mean, it's funny. People say, "Oh, it should be the Music Roll Hall of Fame," and people argue who should be in and who shouldn't. Me and my wife spent 6.5 hours in there and had a blast. Okay, and we walked down. We saw your your little the inscribed near the wall like each year. And it is, to me, we really enjoyed ourselves. But, you've been in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. You've toured with a huge band. You've been in other bands. You have an album. Looking back at your life, what are a few things that make you really proud? Like, when you sit there and reflect back, what are some things that make you very proud?
I think just sticking it out, man. Not giving up, and being loyal to the guys that gave me opportunity. Especially Axel, and I think somehow in the middle of all that, being able to help raise 4 kids, and I think and just not backing down. And not giving up, man. And I think, and being cool to people. I really, really think that's an important thing. Is just don't be a dick. And I think that I'm proud of that stuff, man. I really am. There's a lot of stuff I'm not proud of, which I won't get into, but those are the things I'm proud of for sure.
Well, that's awesome, Al. I'm glad we got to talk tonight. Where can people find your album? You have your website. Where can they get the album? I mean, where are we getting it at?
Yeah, we still have lots of the limited edition vinyl. It's beautiful. It's orange, translucent orange, and it's autographed by me. And there's a poster and some other goodies inside of there. And you can get that if you go to my Instagram page in the bio section and click on Dizzy F and Reed, or there'll be a link you can click on to take you to my website, which will. You can get the record that way, or you can go to the 50Q Records website and order it from there. Okay,
well, this has been great. People, go buy the album, and I call them an album still. I'm never going to stop calling them, and you can actually get an album. It's great, and you really enjoy it. It's got a lot of different sounds, and you'll like that instrumental one. I'm telling you, you'll like the instrumental one. And you can't get an album with him and Johnny Cash because you didn't play with Johnny Cash, play with Johnny Crash. But you can also go to my website, coopertalk.net. You can find over 1,050 episodes there. If you're on YouTube, go check out Coop's Comedy Corner. I interview some of my comedian friends, some TV actors, some screenwriters, some different Emmy-winning TV writers. It's really fun. It's produced by a company out of Philadelphia. And I have a business show. We just won an award, Best Local Podcast. We got an earworthy for the Coop Tank. That's my weekly roundtable. I talk to 3 Philadelphia, South Jersey business people, and we just have a think tank about what's going on in the world. So please go check out Dizzy. Go to coopertalk.net. I'm Steve Cooper. I'm only as hip as my guests. Don't forget, drink your water, eat your vegetables, take your vitamins, and I'll talk to you next time.